The kitchen, where silence lived. The smell reached him before the room did. It was faint but unmistakable. The bitter, metallic scent of something long buried beneath dust, paper, and time. Not the smell of rot or mold that filled most forgotten archives, but something sharper, something that didn't belong. The monastery archive was cold even in summer. Thick stone walls trapped the chill like a cellar meant for secrets. Rows of wooden shelves leaned under the weight of records dating back centuries. Baptism books, ration logs, letters from wars most people had forgotten. Dr. Elias Hartman brushed dust from a leather-bound ledger, and a grey cloud drifted into the thin beam of light coming through the narrow window. Dust tasted dry and bitter on his tongue. He coughed quietly and glanced around the room. The silence here wasn't peaceful. It pressed against his ears. The only sound was the slow creaking of the old building shifting under its own weight. Outside, somewhere beyond the monastery walls, church bells rang for noon, 12 slow chimes. Each echo rolled through the corridors like a warning. Elias opened the ledger carefully. The cracked leather spine groaned as if the book itself resisted being disturbed. The pages smelled faintly of old ink and candle smoke. This monastery in southern Germany had survived the war mostly untouched. Bombs had fallen nearby, armies had marched through, but somehow the place had endured, a quiet island in the chaos of the 1940s. That was why Elias was here. Most wartime records had been destroyed, but monasteries kept everything, every delivery, every guest, every death. His finger ran slowly down a column of names, written in careful black ink. Dates from 1944. He paused. His breath slowed. There were 50 names. Not monks, not villagers, SS officers. Each entry was written on the same day, Sunday. Across the page, beside each name, the same single word appeared again and again in thin script. Verstorben, dead. Elias leaned closer to the page. The faint smell returned, sharp, almost almond-like. It clung to the paper, as if whatever had happened here had left a ghost behind. He turned the page. Another record slipped out from between the sheets. A folded note. The paper crackled between his fingers. Someone had written only one sentence. The handwriting was elegant, careful, and signed with a name Elias recognized from the monastery's records. Sister Agnes. He read the line once, then again. His mouth went dry. Because the note said only this: they trusted the soup. A floorboard creaked behind him, slowly, deliberately. Elias felt the cold air shift across the back of his neck. He was no longer alone in the archive. And the voice that spoke behind him was quiet, almost curious. Strange story, isn't it? Elias turned. But what he saw standing in the doorway made him realize something far more disturbing. Someone here already knew about the soup, and they clearly didn't want the truth leaving the monastery. Before we go deeper, understand this. This story isn't for everyone. If you're still here, you're one of the few who can face what America buried. Subscribe now, and tell me in the comments, what state are you listening from? And would you dare hear this story from your own backyard? Chapter 2. The Man in the Doorway. The man standing in the doorway didn't move. For a moment the archive felt smaller, as if the stone walls had crept closer while Elias wasn't looking. Dust hung in the air between them, glowing in the pale stripe of sunlight from the window. The stranger stepped forward slowly. His shoes scraped softly against the wooden floorboards, the sound dry and brittle like breaking twigs in winter. Elias could hear his own breathing now, slow, careful. Strange story, isn't it? The man repeated, his voice low and calm. He was older, perhaps in his late 60s, tall but slightly stooped, dressed in a dark wool coat that smelled faintly of rain and tobacco. A silver cross hung loosely around his neck. Not a monk, but not quite a visitor either. His grey eyes dropped to the open ledger in Elias's hands, to the names, to the word Verstorben repeated 50 times. The man sighed. That page causes trouble for people who read it too closely. Elias felt the brittle paper of the note still between his fingers. The sentence written by Sister Agnes seemed to burn in his mind. They trusted the soup. "You knew about this?" Elias asked. His voice sounded louder than he intended in the cramped room. The man stepped farther into the archive. The scent of tobacco followed him, mixing with the dry smell of paper and old wood. "I know the stories people whisper," the man said, "but stories are not the same as truth." Elias studied him carefully. "Are you with the monastery?" The man nodded once. "Caretaker, archivist, sometimes both." His eyes flicked toward the note in Elias's hand. "And sometimes," he added quietly, "the person who decides which things should remain buried." The bells outside had stopped ringing. The silence that followed felt heavier than before. Elias turned another page in the ledger. The names continued. 50 officers from an SS supply unit stationed nearby in 1944. Every one of them recorded dead on the same Sunday afternoon. No explanation, no illness, no witnesses. Only the word dead repeated again and again like a drumbeat. Elias looked back up. "That's not a coincidence." The caretaker's expression didn't change. "No," he said slowly. "It isn't." A faint draught slipped through the room, carrying the cold smell of stone and something else. The distant scent of soup drifting from the monastery kitchen upstairs. Warm broth. Onions. Herbs. For a strange second, Elias felt an uncomfortable shiver crawl up his spine. "How did they die?" he asked. The caretaker studied him for a long moment. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small. A tarnished metal spoon. He placed it gently on the desk beside the ledger. The metal clink echoed softly in the quiet archive. "This," he said. Elias frowned. "A spoon?" The caretaker nodded. "From the dining hall." The old metal felt cold when Elias picked it up. He turned it over in his fingers. Scratched into the handle was a tiny engraving. A name. Agnes. Elias looked back up sharply. "Sister Agnes served the soup that day," the caretaker said. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. "And within 2 hours, 50 SS officers were dead." The room seemed to grow colder. Elias stared again at the spoon, at the name carved into the metal. And suddenly, a far more disturbing thought crept into his mind. Because poisoning 50 men in one meal wasn't simple. It required planning. Ingredients, opportunity, and silence. Elias looked at the caretaker. "If she did this," he asked slowly, "why was she never arrested?" The caretaker's grey eyes darkened. "Because," he said, "the official report claimed the officers died of food poisoning." He leaned closer, close enough that Elias could smell tobacco on his breath. "But the real question isn't whether Sister Agnes poisoned them." He paused. His voice dropped to a whisper. "The real question is who helped her." And somewhere above them, in the monastery kitchen, a pot lid suddenly slammed shut. Chapter 3. The Dining Hall. The sound of the lid slamming upstairs echoed through the stone halls like a gunshot. Elias and the caretaker both looked toward the ceiling. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then the caretaker slowly straightened his coat. "Kitchen," he said quietly. The word hung in the air between them. Elias could already smell it again, the warm scent of broth drifting faintly down the corridor, onions simmering, herbs steeping, something earthy and comforting. Soup. It was such an ordinary smell, the kind that belonged to quiet Sundays and long wooden tables. Yet suddenly, it felt wrong. Dangerous. The caretaker gestured toward the doorway. "Come." The corridor outside the archive was dim and narrow, lit only by thin windows that spilled pale afternoon light across the worn stone floor. Their footsteps echoed softly as they walked. Elias could feel the cold of the stones through the thin soles of his shoes. The air tasted stale, like old dust and candle smoke. As they climbed the stairs, the smell of cooking grew stronger. Carrots, celery, a hint of garlic sizzling in butter. His stomach tightened. For a strange moment, he imagined the same smell filling this building in 1944, drifting through the monastery halls while 50 SS officers sat laughing in the dining hall, waiting for lunch, waiting for soup. At the top of the stairs, the caretaker pushed open a heavy wooden door. The kitchen was large and bright compared to the archive below. Copper pots hung from hooks above a long preparation table. Sunlight streamed through wide windows, glinting off polished ladles and knives. Steam curled gently from a pot simmering on the stove. A young nun stood beside it, stirring slowly. The wooden spoon scraped softly against the sides of the pot. She looked up when they entered. Her face was calm but curious. "Brother Matthias," she said to the caretaker, "I didn't know we had visitors." "So that was his name?" Brother Matthias nodded politely. "Researcher," he said, gesturing toward Elias, "studying the monastery records." The nun smiled faintly. Her hands continued stirring the soup. Elias stepped closer to the stove. The steam brushed against his face, warm and fragrant. He could taste the salt and herbs in the air. "What kind of soup?" he asked. "Potato and leek," the nun replied. The broth bubbled softly. Elias watched the vegetables drift beneath the surface. Simple. Innocent. Exactly the kind of meal monks and nuns had served here for centuries. But suddenly, his mind returned to the ledger. 50 dead men. One Sunday lunch. "Did Sister Agnes cook here?" Elias asked. The nun stopped stirring. For just a moment, then the spoon began moving again. "Yes," she said quietly. "Long ago." Brother Matthias folded his arms. "This kitchen hasn't changed much since then." Elias looked around. The long tables, the heavy iron stove, the wooden shelves lined with bowls. It was easy to imagine the room exactly as it must have looked in 1944. Steam rising, bowls filled, 50 officers eating together. Elias turned back to the nun. "Did anyone ever question her?" he asked. The nun hesitated. The soup bubbled quietly between them. Then she said something that made Elias feel a chill run down his spine. "People did ask questions," she said softly. "But Sister Agnes never denied it." Elias blinked. "She confessed?" The nun shook her head slowly. "No." She dipped the spoon into the soup and lifted it slightly, letting the broth drip back into the pot. Sister Agnes only said one thing. Elias felt his heart beat faster. "What did she say?" The nun looked directly at him. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "She said the officers died because God answered her prayer." Elias stared at her. The steam from the soup curled around them like fog. But one thought suddenly refused to leave his mind. Because if Sister Agnes truly believed God answered her prayer, then what exactly had she prayed for that Sunday morning? Chapter 4. The Prayer Book. The kitchen grew quiet after the nun's words. Only the soft bubbling of the soup broke the silence. Steam drifted lazily from the pot, carrying the warm scent of leeks and potatoes. It should have been comforting, but Elias felt a strange tightness in his chest instead. "A prayer," he repeated slowly. The nun nodded. "Yes." Brother Matthias shifted beside him, the floorboards creaking under his weight. "That is what the stories say." Elias stepped closer to the wooden preparation table. His fingers brushed across the worn surface, feeling the deep grooves left by decades of knives and bowls. So she prayed. And 50 officers died? The nun placed the wooden spoon down carefully on the edge of the pot. The soft clack echoed faintly in the kitchen. "Sister Agnes prayed every morning," she said. "That's not unusual," Elias replied. "No," she agreed quietly. "But that Sunday was different." The smell of soup seemed stronger now, thicker, almost heavy in the air. Elias could hear faint sounds from the courtyard outside, Wind rustling through old trees, a distant crow calling somewhere beyond the monastery walls. "Different how?" he asked. The nun wiped her hands slowly on her apron. She asked God to stop them. The words hung in the warm kitchen air. "Stop them?" Elias asked. Brother Matthias gave a quiet sigh. "In 1944, he said, an SS supply unit had taken over the nearby village. They used the monastery as a rest station on Sundays." Elias imagined the scene. Trucks rumbling up the hill, boots pounding on stone floors, loud voices filling the peaceful halls. "They ate here?" Elias asked. Brother Matthias nodded toward the long wooden tables near the windows. "Right there." Elias looked at the tables. Sunlight stretched across the wood, but suddenly he could almost see it. The shadow of uniforms, the clatter of metal spoons, the sharp smell of leather coats and cigarette smoke. "And Sister Agnes served them?" he asked. "Yes." The nun walked to a tall cupboard near the wall. The wood creaked as she opened it. Inside were rows of old books. Carefully she pulled one out. A thin, leather-bound volume. The cover was cracked with age. She carried it back and placed it gently on the table in front of Elias. Dust lifted from the cover as his fingers touched it. The leather felt dry and brittle. "What is it?" he asked. "Sister Agnes's prayer book." Elias felt a strange tension in his stomach. He opened it slowly. The pages smelled faintly of wax and ink. Small handwritten notes filled the margins beside printed prayers. Some were simple, requests for peace, prayers for the sick. But near the middle of the book, Elias found a page marked with a thin red ribbon. He turned it carefully. The handwriting here was darker. The ink pressed deeper into the paper. A single prayer had been written across the page. Elias read it silently. Then again, his mouth went dry, because the prayer didn't ask for mercy. It didn't ask for protection. It asked for something else entirely. A quiet voice behind him spoke. "You see it now, don't you?" Elias looked up at Brother Matthias. "The prayer wasn't meant to save anyone," the caretaker said. "It was meant to judge them." Elias looked back down at the page, but something else on the paper made his blood run cold. There was a small stain near the bottom of the prayer. Dark, faded, almost the color of dried broth, or something much worse. And beside it, written in tiny letters, Sister Agnes had added one final line. 3 words. Words that raised a far more disturbing question, because they read, "It begins with the soup." Disclaimer: this story is purely fictional. Any resemblance to real people, places, or events is entirely coincidental. Chapter 5. The Sunday Table. The words, "It begins with the soup," seemed to linger in the air long after Elias closed the prayer book. The kitchen had grown strangely quiet again. The pot on the stove continued to simmer, releasing slow clouds of steam that curled toward the wooden ceiling beams. The warm scent of leek and potato drifted across the room, rich and earthy. Yet now the smell carried a strange bitterness in Elias's mind. He imagined another Sunday, another pot, another room filled with hungry men. Brother Matthias gently slid the prayer book away from Elias. "Most people who find that page assume it proves Sister Agnes poisoned them," he said. Elias looked up. "And you don't?" The caretaker's thin shoulders lifted slightly. "I believe history is rarely that simple." The young nun returned to stirring the soup, though her movements were slower now, thoughtful. The wooden spoon scraped softly against the iron pot. Elias walked toward the long dining tables by the windows. Sunlight stretched across the worn wood. The surface felt smooth beneath his fingertips, polished by generations of hands and bowls. But the tables were long, very long. He counted the benches, 10 on each side. Enough space for 50 men. Elias tried to picture the room as it must have been on that Sunday in 1944. Boots scraping across stone floors, chairs dragging loudly. The smell of wet wool coats and tobacco smoke filling the air. the sharp voices of SS officers laughing as they sat down to eat. Outside, the bells of the monastery ringing noon. Brother Matthias spoke quietly behind him. They arrived just before lunch. Elias turned. "You know that for certain?" The caretaker nodded. "We have delivery logs from that day. A convoy of trucks stopped here around 11:45. The sound of the spoon stopped." The nun had frozen again beside the stove. Elias noticed the way she stared at the soup, as if seeing something deeper in the broth. "What happened next?" Elias asked. Brother Matthias stepped slowly toward the table. Sister Agnes served the meal. He tapped the wooden surface once with his finger. 50 bowls. Elias imagined the scene unfolding. Steam rising from each bowl, metal spoons clinking against ceramic, men tasting the soup, perhaps laughing, perhaps joking about the quiet monastery kitchen that had prepared their meal. Elias swallowed. How long before they got sick? Brother Matthias hesitated. That's the strange part. Elias felt a chill creep along his spine. They didn't, the caretaker said. They ate everything. The young nun spoke quietly from the stove. The records say they even asked for more. Elias looked back at the pot of soup bubbling behind her. The smell suddenly felt heavier, thicker. What happened after lunch? He asked. Brother Matthias folded his hands behind his back. They thanked Sister Agnes. Elias frowned. Thanked her? Yes. The caretaker's eyes darkened slightly. Then they left. The kitchen felt colder somehow. Elias stared at him. They left alive? Brother Matthias nodded slowly. All 50 of them. Elias felt his heart beating faster. But the ledger says they died that same day. That's correct. The caretaker walked to the window and looked out toward the courtyard. The wind outside rattled the old branches of a tree against the stone wall. They died, Brother Matthias said softly. About 2 hours later. Elias stared at him. Where? The caretaker turned back slowly. His expression was calm, but there was something uneasy in his eyes now. They died in their trucks. Elias blinked. On the road? Brother Matthias nodded once. Every vehicle stopped within a mile of the monastery. Elias felt a cold shiver crawl across his arms, because suddenly a terrible possibility formed in his mind. If they didn't collapse during the meal, if they didn't feel sick until long after they left, then whatever was in that soup must have been something very specific, something carefully chosen. Elias looked toward the pot simmering on the stove, then back at Brother Matthias. What kind of poison works like that? He asked quietly. The caretaker didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached slowly into his coat pocket again and pulled out a small glass vial. Inside it was a faint white powder. Brother Matthias placed it gently on the table. The glass clinked softly against the wood. Elias stared at it. What is it? The caretaker's voice dropped to almost a whisper. The same thing investigators found in the officers' stomachs. Elias felt his throat tighten. What is it called? Brother Matthias met his eyes. Cyanide. Then he added something that made Elias's stomach twist. But the strange part is where they found it. Elias frowned. Where? The caretaker tapped the soup spoon still lying beside the prayer book and said quietly, Not in the soup. Chapter 6. The Spoons. For a moment, Elias thought he had misheard. Not in the soup, he said slowly. The kitchen suddenly felt very still. The pot on the stove continued to bubble, but the soft sound now seemed strangely distant. Steam rose in thin curls, carrying the warm smell of vegetables and herbs. Brother Matthias nodded toward the metal spoon lying beside the prayer book. That's what the investigators discovered, he said quietly. Elias picked up the spoon. The metal was cool against his fingers. Old, worn smooth from years of use. Scratched faintly along the handle was the name he had seen earlier. Agnes. Elias turned the spoon under the light from the window. The metal reflected a dull silver glow. "I don't understand," he said. "If the cyanide wasn't in the soup, how did they swallow it?" The young nun stepped closer now, watching the spoon in Elias's hand. "The report said traces of poison were found on the spoons," she said. Elias frowned. "On the spoons?" Brother Matthias folded his arms. "The soup was tested afterward, completely clean." Elias looked back toward the simmering pot. The smell suddenly made his stomach turn slightly. "So you're saying the soup itself wasn't poisoned?" "That is correct." Elias ran his thumb slowly along the edge of the spoon. The metal felt slightly rough in places where years of polishing had worn it down. His mind raced. Then the poison had to be somewhere else. Brother Matthias nodded once. The spoons. Elias imagined the scene again. 50 officers sitting around the long wooden tables, each lifting a spoonful of soup, metal touching lips, soup sliding down throats. But if cyanide had been placed on the spoons themselves, it would dissolve instantly in the hot broth. Invisible, undetectable. Elias felt a chill spread through his chest. That means Sister Agnes would have had to poison every spoon before serving the meal. Brother Matthias's eyes remained calm. Yes. Elias looked toward the rows of hanging utensils in the kitchen. Dozens of spoons glinted softly in the sunlight. 50 spoons, Elias murmured. That would take time. The young nun spoke quietly. She prepared the dining hall alone that morning. Elias looked back at her. Alone? She nodded. The monks were in prayer. The officers had not arrived yet. Elias's thoughts began to piece together the picture. A quiet kitchen, a table of clean spoons laid out in rows, a nun standing alone with a small vial of poison. Brother Matthias tapped the glass vial sitting on the table. The same type of vial discovered in the officers' convoy. Elias stared at it. Where did she get cyanide? The caretaker's expression darkened slightly. That, he said, is one of the questions that has never been fully answered. The nun stirred the soup again slowly. The wooden spoon moved through the broth with a soft scraping sound. Elias suddenly noticed something. Wait! Brother Matthias looked at him. What? If the poison was on the spoons, then Sister Agnes had to know exactly what she was doing. Yes? She had to know how cyanide works. Yes. Elias's voice dropped. That's not something most nuns would know. The room fell silent again. Even the bubbling pot seemed quieter now. Brother Matthias walked slowly to a small shelf near the wall. He pulled out a thin folder of old papers. Dust rose as he opened it. Inside were several yellow documents. One of them had a black and white photograph attached. Brother Matthias slid the paper across the table toward Elias. Take a look. Elias leaned closer. The photograph showed a young woman standing in a monastery garden. She wore the simple black and white habit of a nun. Her expression was calm, but her eyes were sharp, intelligent, focused. Beneath the photograph, a typed label read, Sister Agnes Keller, 1939. Elias studied the image carefully. Then he noticed something else printed below the name. 3 words that changed everything he thought he knew about her, because before she became a nun, Sister Agnes had another profession entirely. Elias read the line aloud slowly. Former university chemistry lecturer? Brother Matthias nodded and said quietly, which means she knew exactly how to poison 50 men without anyone noticing. Elias stared at the photograph again. But now a far more disturbing thought crept into his mind. Because if Sister Agnes had the knowledge to do this, then the real mystery wasn't how she poisoned them. The real mystery was why she chose that particular Sunday. And what had happened just hours before the officers arrived? Chapter 7. The morning before. The photograph of Sister Agnes remained on the table between them. Elias kept staring at it. The young woman in the image stood beside a row of apple trees, sunlight touching the edge of her veil. Her hands were folded neatly, her posture calm and disciplined. But her eyes told a different story. They were not soft. They were the eyes of someone who observed everything. "Chemistry lecturer," Elias murmured again. Brother Matthias nodded slowly. "She taught at a small university in Munich before the war." The kitchen smelled thicker now as the soup continued to simmer. Steam fogged the nearby window, blurring the view of the courtyard outside. Elias imagined that same kitchen in 1944, the early morning light, the quiet before the officers arrived. If she planned the poisoning, Elias said, then something must have happened that morning. Brother Matthias's expression shifted slightly. "That's possible." Elias leaned closer to the table. "What do the records say about that day?" The caretaker rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "There is one unusual entry." Elias felt a small jolt of anticipation. "Where?" Brother Matthias turned and walked toward a narrow cabinet near the wall. He opened it and pulled out a thin ledger bound with twine. The old book smelled faintly of damp paper and ink when he laid it on the table. "This is the monastery activity log," he said. Every unusual event was recorded. Elias untied the twine and flipped through the fragile pages. His fingers brushed the rough paper, careful not to tear it. Dates scrolled past in faded ink. January, February, March. Then he found it. April 16th, 1944. Sunday. Elias read the entry slowly. At first it seemed ordinary. Morning prayer at dawn. Breakfast for the monks. Kitchen preparations beginning at 9. But then his eyes caught a short note written in hurried handwriting. He leaned closer to read it. The letters were uneven, as if written quickly. A truck arrived before sunrise. 3 officers demanded entry to the monastery. Elias frowned. "That's strange." Brother Matthias nodded. "Very." The young nun had stopped stirring again. She listened quietly now. "What happened next?" Elias asked. Elias read the next line aloud. "The officers searched the grounds and questioned several sisters." A cold sensation crept through his chest. Why would SS officers search a monastery? Brother Matthias gave a quiet sigh. During the war, monasteries were often suspected of hiding things. What things? The caretaker's voice lowered. People. The kitchen suddenly felt colder, despite the steam rising from the stove. Elias continued reading. Another line had been added beneath the first note. Sister Agnes argued with the officers in the courtyard. Elias's eyebrows lifted. She argued with them? Brother Matthias nodded. She was known to speak her mind. Elias imagined the scene outside. Early morning mist hanging over the courtyard, 3 SS officers standing near their truck, and 1 nun confronting them. What were they looking for? Elias asked. Brother Matthias shook his head slowly. That part was never written down. Elias looked back at the page. There was one final sentence at the bottom of the entry, short, almost an afterthought. But the words made Elias's stomach tighten. He read them out loud. The officers left after taking someone with them. Elias froze. The smell of soup suddenly felt sickeningly sweet. He looked up slowly. They took someone. Brother Matthias nodded grimly. Yes? Elias swallowed. Who? The caretaker hesitated. For a moment, the only sound in the kitchen was the bubbling of the soup pot. Then he answered quietly. A boy. Elias blinked. A boy? Brother Matthias looked toward the courtyard window. An orphan the monastery had been hiding. Elias felt his pulse quicken. And Sister Agnes argued with them about it? Yes. Elias stared down at the entry again, because suddenly the timeline felt different. That morning, 3 officers had taken a child from the monastery, and only a few hours later, 50 officers from the same SS unit had eaten lunch here. Elias slowly closed the ledger. His voice was barely a whisper. You think the boy had something to do with it? Brother Matthias didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked back at the photograph of Sister Agnes on the table. Then he said something that made Elias feel a cold shiver down his spine. The boy wasn't just any orphan. Elias frowned. What do you mean? Brother Matthias's voice dropped. The officers believed he was carrying something important. Elias felt his heart beating harder. What? The caretaker met his eyes. A list. Elias stared at him. A list of what? Brother Matthias answered quietly. A list of people the Nazis planned to arrest. The kitchen fell silent again. But one question burned in Elias's mind now. Because if the officers had taken the boy that morning, then Sister Agnes must have known something terrible would happen to him, which meant the poisoning at lunch might not have been random at all. It might have been revenge, or something even more dangerous. And the real question was this. Did the officers actually find the list they were looking for? Or was it still hidden somewhere inside this monastery? Chapter 8. The Hidden List. The word list seemed to echo in Elias's mind. For a moment, he could almost hear the distant rumble of those SS trucks again, arriving before sunrise in the cold spring mist of 1944. The kitchen smelled heavy with steam and herbs, but Elias suddenly noticed another scent creeping in from outside. Damp earth and wet leaves from the monastery garden. The wind had picked up. Branches scraped softly against the windows. A list of names, Elias said slowly. Brother Matthias nodded. That's what the officers believed. Elias leaned against the wooden table, feeling the rough grain press against his palm. What kind of names? The caretaker folded his hands together. Resistance members, Jewish families, priests who secretly helped people escape. Elias felt a chill crawl across the back of his neck. If the Nazis had that list, they would have arrested everyone on it, Brother Matthias finished. The young nun beside the stove spoke quietly. Maybe worse. The bubbling soup suddenly sounded louder in the silence. Elias tried to imagine the boy, a frightened child hiding inside the monastery walls, carrying something powerful enough to make SS officers search the entire building. What happened to him? Elias asked. Brother Matthias looked toward the window again. No one knows. Elias frowned. They took him. Yes. So they must have interrogated him. The caretaker's voice lowered. They did. Elias felt his stomach tighten. And the list? Brother Matthias shook his head slowly. They never found it. The kitchen fell silent again. Elias looked down at the soup spoon still in his hand. Then he looked at the photograph of Sister Agnes lying on the table. The calm face. The sharp eyes. Suddenly, a new possibility formed in his mind. What if she knew where the list was? He asked. Brother Matthias turned, head slowly. That is one theory. Elias placed the spoon back onto the table. If the officers believed she was hiding it, they would have returned. The caretaker's voice carried a quiet certainty. Elias nodded slowly. Yes. And then the terrible realization settled in. If they came back, they would search the monastery again. And this time, Brother Matthias said softly, they would not ask politely. Elias looked back at the photograph of Sister Agnes. She knew that. Yes. So she had to stop them. Brother Matthias didn't reply, but the answer was already hanging in the air. Elias walked slowly toward the window. Outside, the monastery courtyard looked peaceful. Gravel paths, old stone walls, a lone apple tree swaying in the wind. But 80 years ago, this same courtyard had held SS trucks and armed soldiers, men who believed a dangerous list was hidden somewhere inside the monastery. Elias turned back. Did Sister Agnes ever admit to hiding it? Brother Matthias shook his head. No. Elias frowned. Did anyone ever find the list? No. The answer was immediate. Too immediate. Elias studied the caretaker carefully. "You sound very certain." Brother Matthias gave a faint smile. "Because if the list had been found, many people who survived the war would not have." Elias felt a strange unease now. The kitchen felt warmer, but the air seemed heavier. One question kept circling his mind. If the boy never revealed the list, and the officers never found it, then someone must have hidden it very well. Elias looked again at the prayer book lying on the table, then at the spoon, then back at the caretaker. "Where did Sister Agnes go after the poisoning?" he asked. Brother Matthias hesitated. That pause was enough to make Elias's heartbeat quicken. Finally the caretaker answered. "She stayed here." Elias blinked. "She wasn't arrested?" "No." "Interrogated?" "No." Elias stared at him. "That doesn't make sense." Brother Matthias gave a quiet sigh. It was the final year of the war. Germany was collapsing. The investigation never went far. Elias turned toward the kitchen shelves again. The old utensils, the cupboards, the heavy stone walls, and suddenly he felt a strange certainty. If the list had never been found, then there was only one place it could still be. Right here. Somewhere inside this monastery. Elias looked back at Brother Matthias. "What happened to Sister Agnes after the war?" The caretaker's expression grew harder to read. "She died." "When?" Brother Matthias paused again. Then he said something that made the air in the kitchen suddenly feel much colder. 30 years later." Elias frowned. "That's not strange." "No," Brother Matthias agreed quietly. "But the way she died was." Elias felt a chill run down his spine. "What happened?" The caretaker looked directly at him. "She collapsed in the dining hall." Elias swallowed. "From illness?" Brother Matthias shook his head slowly. His voice dropped to a whisper. "She died after eating a bowl of soup." Elias stared at him, because suddenly the past didn't feel finished at all. And a far more disturbing possibility crept into his mind. What if Sister Agnes hadn't been the last person to know the secret of the list? What if someone else in this monastery still knew where it was hidden and was willing to kill to keep it that way? Chapter 9. Shadows in the Dining Hall. The dining hall was quiet now. Elias could feel the weight of the past pressing down on the polished wooden floorboards. Sunlight slanted through tall windows, highlighting scratches and dents that generations of bowls, spoons, and boots had left behind. The air smelled faintly of wax polish and old wood, but beneath it lingered a faint trace of something darker. Iron, copper, almost like dried blood. He imagined the room as it had been in 1944. Steam curling from 50 bowls of soup, officers laughing, joking, entirely unaware that the food they consumed would carry death. The thought made the hairs on his arms stand up. Brother Matthias gestured toward the long tables. "This is where it happened. 50 men, all seated in perfect rows." Elias ran his fingers along the edge of a table. The wood was smooth under his touch, but he could feel its history, the invisible imprint of the chaos it had once held. He inhaled slowly. The faint scent of leeks and potato from the kitchen upstairs seemed to mingle with the imagined odor of fear and sweat from decades past. "The reports say the officers ate quickly," Brother Matthias continued, satisfied with the meal, even requested seconds. They didn't realize the poison was already on the spoons they held. Elias shivered. The notion of invisible death sitting silently in metal, ready to dissolve with hot broth, was chilling. His fingers brushed the edge of a spoon on the table. The cool metal felt almost alive in his grasp, a tiny weapon waiting silently for the next victim. "And the boy?" Elias asked quietly. "The one they took that morning?" Brother Matthias paused. "He was never seen again." Elias felt his stomach twist. If the boy had survived, he would have been a crucial witness. If not, then the officers had unknowingly sealed their own fate. The sunlight shifted, and the rote. Seemed darker for a second, as though the shadows themselves were moving along the walls. Elias heard the faintest creak of a chair behind him, though he was alone. The wind outside rattled the window panes, carrying a whisper of cold air that made him tense. Some historians claim Sister Agnes acted alone, Brother Matthias said. But the timing, the preparation, the exact placement of poison, someone must have helped her. Elias's mind raced. The logistics were terrifyingly precise. 50 spoons, each coated, arranged perfectly on the table, all consumed within an hour. Someone had orchestrated it, and if that someone was still in the monastery, the question was simple. Were they still guarding the secret? He ran a hand along the worn table again. The faint metallic tang of the old wood mixed with the imagined scent of boiling broth. It was like tasting history itself. Suddenly, a sound made him jump, a faint shuffle from the far corner of the hall. The room was empty, but the noise had come from somewhere behind the rows of benches. Elias's heartbeat quickened. He wasn't alone. Brother Matthias's voice was low. Some secrets never leave a place, and some people never truly go. The shadows near the far wall seemed to shift, moving closer with the afternoon light. Elias could almost hear faint whispers, indistinct, like memories brushing against his ears. A cold draft brushed across his neck. He turned sharply. Nothing. Just the long wooden benches and the polished tables. Elias swallowed hard. His fingers clutched the edge of the table. He knew deep down that the most dangerous part of this story wasn't what Sister Agnes had done. It was what, or who, remained behind to ensure it was never fully discovered. And in that moment, a single thought struck him like ice. Someone was still watching. Chapter 10. Footsteps in the cloister. The monastery cloister was silent, save for the faint crunch of Elias's shoes on the gravel path outside the dining hall. The air smelled damp, earthy, and faintly of moss that clung to the stone walls. A breeze stirred the thin veil of fog rolling off the hillside, carrying with it the distant scent of the monastery garden, apple blossoms, wet soil, and a trace of herbs from the kitchen below. Brother Matthias walked beside him, his steps deliberate and quiet. "Many believe the cloisters are peaceful," he said, his voice soft. "But history leaves echoes. Some are better left undisturbed." Elias glanced around. Shadows stretched along the arches, long and dark, moving with the late afternoon sun. Somewhere above, a bird called, then fell silent. The world felt unnaturally still, as though holding its breath. "What about the boy?" Elias asked. "Was he ever really taken?" The caretaker shook his head slowly. "No official record. Just whispers in the village. People claimed he disappeared that morning. Some said he was hidden. Some said taken far away." His voice trailed off, leaving the sentence unfinished. Elias's eyes followed the stone walkway. The wind whispered through the arches, carrying a faint scraping sound, almost like footsteps echoing behind them. He paused, turning sharply. "Nothing." "You hear that?" Elias whispered. Brother Matthias shook his head. "Cloisters have their own language. Stones speak under the feet. Wind makes voices." But Elias wasn't convinced. The sound had been deliberate, uneven, human. The caretaker stopped beneath a narrow archway. "This is where the officers were brought that morning. The boy and the men who searched for the list." His voice lowered to a whisper. "Every Sunday, the monastery kitchens filled with food for soldiers. That morning, the officers thought they had the upper hand. They never suspected Sister Agnes had plans of her own." Elias ran a hand along the cool stone. Tiny cracks beneath his fingers felt like the scars of decades. He tried to picture the scene. The boy, trembling, standing beside the abbey wall, the officers, boots heavy on stone, and a nun watching them, calm but determined. A faint scent caught his nose, something metallic. Not blood, but old iron. He shivered. The memory of 50 men collapsing hours later rushed unbidden into his mind. "Do you think someone helped her?" Elias asked quietly. Brother Matthias's gaze followed the arches disappearing into darkness. Perhaps. The logistics, the timing, the knowledge. It seems improbable for one person alone, but no record names anyone else. Only Sister Agnes's actions remain. Elias paused, glancing toward a narrow window where sunlight barely penetrated the shadowed corridor. A faint flicker of movement, too fast, too small to be a person, caught his eye. He blinked. Nothing. Yet the feeling of being watched did not leave him. The caretaker spoke again, almost under his breath. Some say Sister Agnes left a warning. Something hidden. A message for anyone who might try to find the list. Elias's pulse quickened. A warning? Brother Matthias nodded. A message. Something subtle. Something no one noticed. For decades. Elias's gaze drifted back to the dining hall in the distance, the same room where 50 men had died. The wooden tables, polished and still, seemed innocuous. Yet the memory of poison coated on spoons, the careful placement, the prayer book, and the boy's disappearance. It all screamed that nothing in this monastery was as it appeared. A branch tapped sharply against the stone wall. Another footstep, or so Elias thought. He swallowed hard. Someone, or something, was moving in the shadows, and it was not meant to let him leave the cloister without knowing the full truth. Did you know, during World War II, many nuns and Catholic clergy were persecuted, arrested, and even murdered by the Nazis because they resisted the regime, helped Jews and resistance fighters, or defended human dignity under occupation. The Nazis targeted religious figures alongside other groups they saw as threats to their ideology. For example, in Poland, where the Nazi regime exerted brutal control, thousands of Catholic clergy, including priests, monks, and nuns, were imprisoned, sent to concentration camps, or killed between 1939 and 1945. Nazi authorities closed churches and convents, seized religious property, and cracked down on clergy who opposed their policies. One poignant case comes from Poland's Institute of National Remembrance, where archaeologists and historians uncovered the skeletons of Catholic nuns murdered toward the end of the war by occupying forces. A stark reminder that religious women faced violence just for being priests and caregivers in the war zone. These stories show that nuns were not merely passive figures during the war. Many became part of resistance networks, sheltered Jews, cared for the wounded, and were targeted as part of Nazi repression. While there is no verified historical record of a nun poisoning Nazi officers with soup, there are many documented accounts of courageous nuns suffering and resisting under the terror of Nazi occupation. And their sacrifices are part of real Wetterau history. Chapter 11. The Secret Passage. Elias's footsteps echoed softly in the stone corridor, the faint scrape of his shoes blending with the distant hum of the monastery bell. The wind outside pressed against the narrow windows, carrying the scent of wet earth and decaying leaves. Somewhere faintly, he could detect the aroma of herbs still simmering in the kitchen below. Thyme, parsley, onion, comforting and deadly all at once. Brother Matthias paused beside a heavy wooden door, its surface worn smooth by decades of hands pushing it open and shut. "Few know this," he said, lowering his voice, "but Sister Agnes didn't just move through the dining hall and kitchen. She had her own private route, a path no one suspected." Elias frowned. "A path?" The caretaker nodded, producing an old iron key from the folds of his coat. "A passage. It runs beneath the monastery walls." The air seemed colder here, heavier, as Elias followed Brother Matthias down the narrow corridor. The stone walls pressed close. He could feel the rough edges against his fingertips, taste the damp chill on his tongue. The faint scent of something metallic lingered, old iron, like the edge of a knife. "Why?" Elias asked quietly. "Why would she need a passage?" Brother Matthias stopped before a small wooden panel inset in the stone. Access, timing, escape, and secrecy. She prepared everything before the officers even arrived that morning. 50 spoons coated, a prayer said. The boy already moved to safety. The passage ensured no one could see her. Elias studied the panel. It was simple, unassuming, yet perfectly placed beneath the stairwell. He pressed lightly. It moved just enough to reveal a narrow stairway descending into darkness. A faint, musty smell rose from below. Dust, damp stone, and something else. Something old. He inhaled sharply, feeling the cold crawl up his spine. "Did anyone ever use it?" Elias asked. Brother Matthias shook his head. "Not that we know of. Only Sister Agnes. She trusted no one with the timing. She alone controlled what would happen in the dining hall." Elias descended slowly, the stone steps slippery under his shoes. Every breath fogged slightly in the damp air. His fingertips brushed the rough, cold wall. The silence was so complete that even his heartbeat felt intrusive. At the bottom, the passage opened into a low, narrow corridor. Flickers of sunlight sneaked in from tiny cracks above. The air smelled of earth, mold, and something faintly acrid, like dried herbs mixed with decay. "This is where she staged it all," Brother Matthias whispered. "From here, she moved the spoons, prepared the dining hall, ensured the boy was hidden. And then—" He let the sentence hang, letting the weight of 50 deaths fill the space between them. Elias's mind raced. A child hidden, spoons poisoned, 50 men oblivious to the danger in their hands. The logistics were terrifyingly precise. He stopped mid-step, noticing a faint scrape along the stone floor, a mark that didn't belong. His eyes followed it to a small metal clasp embedded in the wall. He bent down, pressing lightly, and a panel swung open, revealing a tiny chamber. Inside, dust coated everything. Faded paper and a few objects lay scattered across the floor. Elias's fingers trembled as he reached for a folded piece of parchment. The writing was faint, in elegant cursive. It matched the handwriting in the prayer book. He unfolded it slowly, and froze. The words scrawled across the page made him taste copper on his tongue and feel a chill run through his bones. "If they find this, everything dies with them." A shadow moved at the far end of the passage. Someone or something was watching. Chapter 12. The Watcher. The shadow lingered at the end of the passage, barely visible in the dim light filtering through cracks above. Elias froze, the parchment trembling in his hands. The words written by Sister Agnes burned in his mind. "If they find this, everything dies with them." His heart pounded, echoing off the stone walls. The air was damp and heavy, carrying the faint scent of mold mixed with the faint metallic tang of iron, like blood long dried. Each inhale made his stomach twist. "Who's there?" Elias called quietly, trying to sound braver than he felt. No answer. The shadow shifted slightly. A footstep, soft, deliberate, scraped against stone. Elias's skin prickled. Someone was moving closer, but the passage was too narrow to see them clearly. Brother Matthias whispered behind him, "Stay calm. Some secrets are protected for a reason." Elias swallowed. Protected or trapped. A faint rustling echoed from the far wall. Dust stirred in the beam of sunlight, tiny motes floating like ghosts. The air smelled faintly of the kitchen herbs carried from above, but now mixed with something acrid. Smoke? Or the remnants of old fire? The shadow stepped into the weak light. Elias could see the outline of a figure, a thin, hunched frame, a hooded cloak, eyes hidden in darkness. "Who are you?" Elias demanded, clutching the parchment like a lifeline. The figure remained silent. Then a low, rasping voice spoke. "You shouldn't be here." The words made Elias flinch. There was something almost alive in the warning, something sharp and deliberate. Brother Matthias stepped forward, placing a hand gently on Elias's shoulder. "They've been here before, watching, waiting." The shadow shifted again, a faint metallic glint catching the light. Elias's eyes widened. Another spoon, like the one Sister Agnes had used, hung from a hidden belt at the figure's waist. The air seemed to thicken, almost tasteable, dust, iron, and the faint hint of poison. Elias gagged slightly, heart hammering. "Why are you following us?" he asked. The figure took one step closer, The sound of leather boots echoed softly. Then it stopped. "You shouldn't touch the past," the voice said again. Elias glanced at Brother Matthias. The caretaker's face was calm, but his eyes were cold and alert. "This isn't just history, Elias," he said. "This is a warning. Some things, once uncovered, can't be undone." The shadow took another step forward, and Elias felt the air shift. A faint coldness ran along his neck and arms, making the hairs stand on end. Then the figure spoke one final line. "Some secrets are protected, even in death." A sudden gust of wind blew through the passage, extinguishing the faint sliver of sunlight and throwing the hall into near darkness. Elias could feel the presence behind him vanish, as if it had melted into the walls. The parchment shook in his hands. He stared at it. The words, "Everything dies with them," seemed suddenly more alive, more urgent. Elias swallowed. The sense of being watched didn't fade. Someone, or something, was still guarding the secrets of Sister Agnes. And he realized the chilling truth. Uncovering them might be far more dangerous than he had imagined. Because the Watcher wasn't just protecting the past, they were protecting a deadly present. Chapter 13. The Hidden Chamber. Elias's hands trembled as he folded the parchment back into his coat pocket. Every step he took along the stone passage felt heavier, as though the walls themselves were pressing in. The air was cold, damp, and carried the faint odor of iron and dust. Each breath tasted of mildew and something faintly acrid, like the lingering memory of smoke. Brother Matthias stopped before a narrow alcove, partially hidden behind a stone pillar. "This," he said quietly, "is where she kept it." Elias squinted. The alcove looked ordinary at first glance. But as his eyes adjusted, he noticed a faint seam in the stone wall, almost invisible. A hidden door. "Are you sure?" Elias asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Brother Matthias nodded. "All signs point here. This is where Sister Agnes secured the list, and where she prepared her revenge." Elias reached out to touch the wall. Cold stone met his fingers. A faint groove traced along the edge of the seam. He pressed gently, and with a soft click, a section of stone swung inward to reveal a narrow, dimly lit chamber. The smell hit him instantly. Dust, decay, and a sharp metallic tang that made him gag slightly. The air was still, almost suffocating. Elias's eyes adjusted to the gloom. Inside, the room was small, barely wide enough for one person to stand. The walls were lined with shelves, each filled with bundles of old papers, jars of herbs, and a few metal utensils. A thin layer of dust covered everything, disturbed only by the faint traces of movement, footprints in the dust, as if someone had been here not long ago. Elias bent down, picking up one of the bundles. Old parchment, brittle and yellowed. Letters scrawled in Sister Agnes's elegant handwriting. Lists of names, locations, and dates. His heart raced. The same list the SS officers had been searching for, the one the boy had carried there. "Morning." This is it," Elias whispered. Brother Matthias stepped closer, his voice low and grave. "It wasn't meant to survive. Not this long." Elias ran his fingers over the edges of the parchment. The ink had faded, but the words were still legible. Resistance members, families, priests. The list was horrifyingly complete. Then something on the far shelf caught his eye. A small wooden box, locked with a rusted clasp. He walked over, hesitated, and opened it carefully. Inside lay dozens of metal spoons, each one tarnished with age, faintly sticky to the touch. He held one up. A chill ran down his spine. This was no ordinary utensil. The faint trace of powder on the surface glinted in the dim light. The same method she had used decades ago. 50 officers, 50 spoons. Death delivered silently. Elias shivered, imagining the careful work that morning. One nun alone, coating each spoon, praying silently, hiding the boy, and sending 50 men to their deaths without a sound. Brother Matthias spoke quietly from behind him. She believed justice required no witnesses, only the tools, the timing, and faith. Elias's eyes widened as he looked around the chamber. The hidden space seemed almost alive, every shadow hiding the weight of decades-old secrets. Then he noticed something else. Another piece of parchment tucked under the spoons, small, folded tightly. He unfolded it carefully. A single line was written in Sister Agnes's precise hand. "One day they will return. Prepare for them." Elias felt the air grow colder. The chamber seemed to pulse around him. Someone, or something, was still protecting the secret. And the thought that the warning might not be about the past but the present sent a shiver straight through him. Because if Sister Agnes had truly prepared, then whoever, or whatever, was guarding it now, was ready. Chapter 14. The Forgotten Corridor. Elias carefully tucked the parchment back into his coat pocket, feeling the weight of decades pressing down on him. The hidden chamber smelled of damp stone, dust, and faint metallic tangs, as if the memory of poison lingered in the air itself. His fingers brushed against the tarnished spoons again, and the thought of 50 men dying silently made his stomach twist. Brother Matthias gestured toward the narrow exit of the chamber. "There's more," he said quietly. "Sister Agnes had another passage, one fewer people knew about. Even the officers never discovered it." Elias's curiosity sharpened, despite the unease curling in his chest. "Another passage?" "Yes," Matthias whispered, his eyes scanning the shadows. "It runs along the eastern wall beneath the cloister. Few have walked it. Fewer still have returned knowing its secrets." The air in the corridor beyond felt colder. Elias's breath fogged slightly in the dim light, mingling with the faint smell of mold and old herbs carried from the kitchen above. Every stone underfoot seemed soaked with history, wet with the echoes of past footsteps, hushed prayers, and whispered warnings. They walked in silence, Elias's heart hammering with each step. The narrow corridor twisted sharply, stone walls pressing close. The smell of iron became stronger, almost tangible, carrying with it an unmistakable sense of danger. "Why did she go to such lengths?" Elias asked. "Why all this secrecy?" Brother Matthias's eyes were fixed ahead, the corners shadowed. The officers weren't just soldiers. They were hunting information, lists, names, evidence of anyone who opposed them. She had to protect not only the boy, but everyone who might be on that list. And she was ready to kill to do it. A faint scratching echoed somewhere along the stone wall. Elias froze. His fingers brushed against the cold surface, tasting the dust and stone. Something or someone was moving nearby. "Stay close," Brother Matthias whispered. "Not all who guard secrets are friendly. Some are still loyal to her methods." The corridor opened into a tiny vaulted chamber, barely large enough for 2 people. Elias peered inside, his eyes adjusting to the gloom. Broken pieces of pottery, faded paper, and a few tarnished utensils littered the floor. The air smelled of damp earth and age. Then Elias saw it, a small wooden panel, almost invisible against the stone wall. His heart thumped. This could be another hiding place, or a trap. Brother Matthias stepped forward and pressed lightly. The panel shifted, revealing a tight spiral stair leading downward. Cold air hissed upward, carrying the faintest scent of herbs mixed with something acrid, poison perhaps, or simply the remnants of it. "Do we go down?" Elias asked, swallowing hard. Brother Matthias's gaze was steady. "If you want the truth." "Yes." The first step was icy cold beneath Elias's shoes. The spiral narrowed, forcing him to hug the wall. Each breath felt heavier, each step more uncertain. The faint echoes of the past followed them, footsteps, whispers, the sound of distant laughter cut abruptly short. At the bottom, the stair opened into a low stone corridor that seemed to stretch endlessly. Elias felt the weight of the walls, their cool surfaces almost pressing inward. Shadows clung to every corner, and the faint smell of metal and dust became almost suffocating. Then, at the far end, a faint glimmer of light caught his eye. A wooden door, old but sturdy, with a small slit at eye level. Something inside it seemed alive, watching, waiting. Brother Matthias whispered, his voice barely audible, "Whatever waits beyond that door, it has been guarding Sister Agnes's secrets for decades, and it hasn't forgotten a single thing." Elias felt a cold, prickling sense of dread. He realized the truth, clear and terrifying. Opening that door could answer every question, or it could awaken something far worse. And the faint metallic scent in the air suddenly made sense. They weren't alone. Chapter 15. The Locked Door. Elias approached the wooden door at the end of the low stone corridor, every step echoing softly against the ancient walls. The air smelled damp and metallic, with faint traces of herbs from the kitchen above. The corridor felt alive, pressing in from all sides, shadows clinging to him like silent observers. Brother Matthias stopped beside him. "This is where it ends, or begins," he said quietly. "Whatever Sister Agnes left, whatever she protected, it's behind this door." Elias's hand hovered over the rusted iron handle. Cold seeped through the metal, sending a shiver up his spine. He felt the weight of decades pressing against the door, a barrier between the living and the dead secrets it held. "Do we open it?" Elias asked, his voice barely a whisper. Matthias gave a slow, solemn nod. "We have no choice if we want the truth. But be ready. Some secrets are guarded long after their keepers are gone." The keyhole glinted in the dim light, and Matthias produced the iron key from his coat pocket, the same one used for the hidden chamber. He inserted it carefully, and with a soft click, the lock turned. The door groaned as it opened inward. The room beyond was darker than the corridor, the faintest light spilling in from cracks near the ceiling. The smell hit Elias instantly: dust, damp stone, and something acrid, almost bitter. He gagged slightly, tasting iron on his tongue. Inside, the room was small, but filled with artifacts of secrecy. Bundles of old papers stacked neatly, jars of dried herbs, and the faint outline of metal spoons arranged in a pattern almost ceremonial in nature. Every surface was coated with decades of dust, yet the imprint of careful hands was still visible. Elias stepped closer to a stack of parchments. The handwriting was unmistakable. Sister Agnes's elegant cursive. Lists of names, addresses, and coded notes. His pulse quickened. "Everything," Matthias whispered. "The list, the spoons, the preparations. It's all here." Elias bent over a small table at the center of the room. A single bowl sat atop it, untouched. Its contents had long evaporated, leaving only a faint residue on the porcelain. The smell of the past, soup, herbs, and that unmistakable metallic tang, lingered still. Suddenly, a faint scraping noise made both men freeze. Dust fell from a high shelf, and a shadow moved across the far wall. Elias's breath caught in his throat. "Who's there?" he called, trying to steady his voice. No answer, just the faint echo of footsteps, slow, deliberate, almost ghostly. Matthias's eyes darkened. "I warned you. Some secrets are protected, even in death." Elias scanned the room. There, tucked beneath a loose floorboard, he noticed a tiny bundle wrapped in faded cloth. He knelt carefully, unwrapping it. Inside, more spoons, tarnished, stained faintly with white powder, cyanide. His stomach twisted. Then he noticed something else, another piece of parchment, folded tightly. Unfolding it, he read the words slowly, his pulse hammering. "They will return. Make no mistake. Only the prepared survive." A cold gust of wind swept through the room, extinguishing the faint light. Elias shivered. The metallic scent grew stronger, sharper, more immediate. Something was moving, watching, waiting, and suddenly he understood. The monastery had not forgotten Sister Agnes's methods. It had been waiting for the next intruder. Chapter 16. The breath behind him. The gust of wind swept through the locked room, carrying dust and the faint metallic scent that made Elias's stomach churn. He pressed the parchment closer to his chest, fingers trembling. The words, "Only the prepared survive," burned in his mind, a warning more immediate than he wanted to admit. Brother Matthias stepped forward slowly, his boots scraping softly against the stone floor. "We need to leave soon," he whispered. "Whatever watches this place, it doesn't like strangers." Elias's eyes darted around the room. Shadows pooled in corners, stretching unnaturally. The faint echo of footsteps seemed to circle him, though no one else was visible. His skin prickled, the sensation like tiny hands brushing his neck. Then he felt it. A breath. Cold. Shallow. Directly behind him. Elias froze. His pulse hammered so loudly he was sure whoever, or whatever, was there could hear it. "Who's there?" he demanded, his voice tight. No answer. Just the faint metallic smell, stronger now, clinging to his clothes and hair. Brother Matthias's voice was calm but tense. "Remember what I said. Some secrets protect themselves." Elias slowly turned, every muscle taut. The shadows near the far wall seemed to shift, coalescing, like smoke with a mind of its own. He could see nothing clearly, only darkness and the suggestion of movement. A faint whisper brushed against his ear, almost inaudible. "Leave, or join them." Elias's stomach lurched. Join them? The word seemed to echo in his mind, a reminder of the 50 officers who had died decades ago, poisoned by Sister Agnes's careful hands. He stepped back toward the bundle of spoons, tripping slightly on a loose floorboard. The faint scrape echoed, a stark contrast to the complete silence elsewhere. The metallic scent intensified, and Elias gagged, clutching his stomach. Brother Matthias put a steadying hand on his shoulder. "The passage out is narrow. Move slowly. Don't draw attention." Elias nodded, swallowing hard. He felt the weight of the room pressing down on him, the centuries of secrecy, and the knowledge that someone, or something, was observing his every move. Another step, slow and deliberate, sounded behind him. He froze. Every hair on his neck stood on end. Then the shadow moved closer, brushing the edge of the light. Elias could see a faint outline, small, hunched, careful, but impossibly fast. A glint of metal caught the light, another tarnished spoon, like the one Sister Agnes had used. Elias's pulse spiked. Whoever, or whatever, was here had been following her method all these years. "Be ready," Brother Matthias whispered. "This is not the first time someone has come seeking the list, and it will not be the last." Elias realized with a chill that ran to his toes that the monastery was alive with the memory of death, and that memory was still hungry. A faint hiss echoed behind him, followed by the scraping of metal on stone. Elias spun. Nothing. Then he understood the horrifying truth. He was not just being watched. He was being tested, and if he failed, he would join the others who had underestimated Sister Agnes's reach. Chapter 17. The Whispered Warning. Elias's breath came in short, sharp gasps, echoing faintly off the stone walls. The metallic scent in the air clung to his tongue and throat, bitter and sharp. He glanced at Brother Matthias, whose expression was calm but tense, like a man used to walking in rooms where the past still had teeth. Did anyone ever survive after touching the spoons?" Elias asked, his voice trembling. Brother Matthias shook his head slowly. "Only those who knew the rules. The preparation, the timing. Sister Agnes left instructions, but they weren't written plainly. Only someone careful could follow them." Elias swallowed hard, tasting dust and something acrid. He shivered, feeling the weight of the hidden chamber pressing in from all sides. The shadows in the corners seemed to pulse, stretching toward him as if alive. A faint whisper brushed against his ear. So soft he thought he imagined it. "Leave, before it's too late." He spun, but no one was there. Just the shadows, thick and watching. The metallic glint of the spoons in the small bundle on the floor caught the dim light, reflecting like tiny eyes. "The monastery remembers," Brother Matthias said quietly. Sister Agnes prepared everything meticulously. She knew how to guard the list, and anyone who sought it. Elias's heart thumped. So, the Watchers? They're still here? Yes, Matthias said. Not just people. The methods, the traps, the poisoned utensils. They've survived her. They protect the secret as fiercely as she did. The whisper came again, this time clearer, almost a hiss. Do not touch. Do not stay. Elias felt the chill crawl up his spine. The words were not just warning. They were promise and threat. He moved toward the doorway, careful to avoid the loose floorboards. Every step made the shadows stretch and recoil. The metallic tang of the spoons seemed stronger, sharper, almost like electricity in the air. Brother Matthias placed a hand on his shoulder. You need to understand something, he said. Sister Agnes was brilliant, methodical, and ruthless. The SS officers didn't know they were being watched, tested, or marked for death. The caretaker hesitated. His eyes darkened. You are being tested now. Elias froze. The words made his stomach drop. Tested? Like the officers? A scraping sound came from behind a pile of jars. A shadow flickered against the wall. Elias's pulse quickened. Whoever, or whatever, was here had been waiting, patient, silent, calculating. He could feel the cold brush against his neck, the faint hiss of breath, and the metallic scent of something deadly. Brother Matthias leaned close. One wrong move, Elias, and you won't make it out of here. Elias glanced at the bundle of spoons. His fingers itched to inspect them, but he knew any contact could be fatal. The whisper rose again, louder this time, echoing faintly off the walls. Leave, or join them. The air felt charged, alive, and Elias understood with a sinking certainty. Sister Agnes had prepared her legacy not only to kill the unworthy, but to guard her secrets, forever. And now, he was standing in its center. Chapter 18. The Edge of Discovery. Elias's hands were clammy as he pressed himself against the cold stone wall, trying to steady his racing heart. The metallic tang of iron was thicker now, almost choking him. The air smelled of damp dust, old wood, and a faint trace of the herbs that had once hidden poison in a simple Sunday lunch. The whisper came again, soft but insistent, curling around his ears like smoke. Do not touch. Do not uncover, or die. He swallowed hard, tasting copper in his mouth. Every nerve in his body screamed to run, but curiosity rooted him in place. The hidden chamber, Sister Agnes's secret, was tantalizingly close to complete revelation. The bundle of spoons lay on the floor, glinting faintly in the dim light. The parchment with her coded instructions waited in his pocket. Brother Matthias's voice was low, almost a growl. Every step you take now is under her watch. She trusted no one, and neither do her methods. Elias glanced at the small wooden door at the far end of the corridor. Behind it, the secrets of 50 deaths, a stolen boy, and a list that could have destroyed countless lives lay dormant. The shadows pooled in front of it, thick and watchful. A faint scraping echoed behind him. He spun. Nothing. Just shadows that seemed darker than before. The metallic scent intensified, sharp and biting. Elias's hands shook. He realized he could hear his heartbeat, loud and uneven, echoing in the stone chamber. The list, Elias whispered. It's here. Somewhere. Brother Matthias's eyes met his, cold and unreadable. It is. But finding it is not the same as surviving it. A faint hiss slid through the corridor, like breath across stone. Only the prepared survive. Only the worthy touch what is hidden. Elias stepped closer to the bundle of spoons, his fingers brushing the edge. The touch made his skin crawl. The metallic scent became stronger, almost tangible. He pulled back sharply, suddenly aware that the room seemed alive with anticipation, watching, waiting. "Do you think the boy—" Elias began, then stopped. The thought of the orphan who had vanished decades ago sent a shiver down his spine. "Do you think he survived?" Brother Matthias's voice dropped to a whisper. "Perhaps. Or perhaps he became part of the secret. Some things are protected beyond human comprehension." The faint scrape came again. A shadow shifted near the back of the chamber, too fast for the eye to follow. Elias felt his pulse spike. He realized the truth. The monastery, the spoons, the chamber. They were still lethal, still guarding, still patient. And now, he was in the middle of it. A cold draft snaked along his neck. He froze. Then he heard it clearly, a soft click, like a lock being turned somewhere in the chamber. Elias's stomach lurched. Someone, or something, was moving closer. The question slammed into him like ice. Was he about to uncover the last secret of Sister Agnes? Or his own death? Chapter 19. The Eyes in the Darkness. Elias froze, the soft click still ringing in his ears. His pulse thundered like distant war drums, each beat echoing off the stone walls. The metallic tang in the air had thickened, clinging to his tongue, sharp and almost suffocating. Dust swirled faintly in the dim light, disturbed by a movement he could not see. Brother Matthias's voice was barely audible. "They're here, watching, waiting. Every intruder into this chamber has felt the same." Elias swallowed hard, tasting copper and fear. His eyes darted to the shadows that pooled in the corners, darker than the rest of the room, as if the stone itself had absorbed decades of death and secrecy. A sound, a subtle shuffle, made him jerk his head toward the far wall. There, between two shelves of jars and parchment, he thought he saw movement, something small, deliberate, eyes glinting faintly in the darkness. "Who's there?" he whispered, trying to steady his voice. No answer, just a faint metallic glint, like the edge of a spoon catching the meager light. The whisper returned, soft, almost a hiss, brushing against his ear. "Do not touch. Do not linger. Or join them." Elias's heart thudded painfully in his chest. Join them? The word echoed with a deadly resonance. The officers, the boy, the spoons, the poison. Death. The shadows shifted again, closer this time, and a faint scrape echoed along the stone floor. Elias realized with a jolt that the monastery itself seemed to move, alive with centuries of secrets. Brother Matthias's hand pressed lightly on Elias's shoulder. "If you want the truth, you must be prepared to face it. Everything Sister Agnes built, every precaution, every trap, still works." Elias glanced at the bundle of spoons on the floor, tarnished, faintly sticky, each one a deadly instrument. He could almost imagine her small hands coating them carefully, praying silently, orchestrating 50 deaths with frightening precision. A faint hiss of air brushed across the back of his neck. He spun around. Nothing. Then the eyes appeared. 2 glinting orbs low to the ground, shifting in the shadows. Elias froze. The metallic smell grew stronger. It wasn't just iron this time. It was acrid, chemical, unmistakably poison. He swallowed hard, a thin film of sweat coating his palms. They're alive, or someone has been guarding this chamber all along. The whisper rose again, louder this time, echoing around the vaulted stone. Only the prepared survive. Only the worthy leave. Elias realized the horrifying truth. Sister Agnes had not just poisoned men. She had created a living legacy, a deadly labyrinth that would punish anyone daring to uncover it. And now he was standing in its center. A movement in the far shadows, closer, deliberate. His stomach turned. Someone, or something, was waiting to see if he was worthy. And the next moment could decide whether he left alive or joined the ghosts of 50 men and the boy who had vanished decades ago. Chapter 20. The Final Revelation. Elias's chest heaved as he stood frozen in the center of the hidden chamber. The metallic tang of iron and faint poison clung to his tongue and throat, bitter and suffocating. Shadows clung to the corners of the room, thick and silent, as if the darkness itself were alive. Brother Matthias stepped closer, his face grim. "You've seen the spoons, the list, the chamber, but there's one last truth." Elias's heart skipped. One last truth. Matthias nodded, voice low, almost reverent. Sister Agnes didn't just act alone. She had guidance, someone, or something, that ensured the plan succeeded. 50 officers died because it was never meant to fail. Elias's eyes darted to the shadowy corners. The metallic glint he had seen earlier flickered again, small and deliberate, like a warning. He swallowed hard, tasting copper and fear. "You mean," he started, voice trembling, "someone is still guarding it?" Brother Matthias's eyes never left the darkness. Not just guarding, testing, ensuring that only the prepared touch her secrets. That includes the boy, the lists, the tools, even the passageways. The monastery itself became part of her plan. Elias's pulse raced. The air felt alive, almost pulsing, carrying the faint scent of herbs, dust, and old iron. He could hear the soft scrape of movement behind a shelf, faint but deliberate. He realized with growing horror that Sister Agnes's methods had become more than a plan. They were a legacy, a living, breathing trap. Then Matthias gestured toward a small wooden box tucked under a shelf. Elias's hands shook as he opened it. Inside were dozens of tiny vials, each containing faintly colored powders, poisons, carefully measured. A note lay atop them in Sister Agnes's unmistakable hand. "Justice is silent, swift, and unseen. Only the worthy may survive my work. Guard it well." Elias's stomach churned. 50 men had died quietly, without warning, because one woman's patience and cunning had outsmarted even trained officers. A soft, deliberate movement at the far end of the chamber made both men tense. A shadow shifted, eyes glinting, almost human in their focus. The metallic tang intensified, sharp and acrid, biting at Elias's throat. Brother Matthias whispered, "You understand now. This is not just history. It's a living warning. Anyone who tries to expose it unprepared." The shadow stepped forward, revealing a small, hunched figure. Elias's stomach turned. It moved deliberately, silently. Its eyes gleamed with the same cold intelligence that had orchestrated the 50 deaths decades ago. "You are not ready," it whispered, voice raspy, almost a hiss. Elias's breath caught. He understood suddenly that Sister Agnes's work had not ended with her death. The monastery, the spoons, the poison, the secret passages, they were all still active, watching, judging, waiting. And the final, terrifying thought struck him. The nun had not just poisoned men. She had created a legacy that could kill again. And now it had its eyes on him. Chapter 21. The Hidden Guardian. Elias's legs felt like lead as he backed away from the shadow at the far end of the chamber. The metallic tang of poison clung to his senses, sharp and biting, mixing with the faint dust and damp stone. Every breath was thick, almost tasteable, like the air itself was warning him to leave. Brother Matthias's hand gripped his shoulder firmly. "Do not make a sound. Every movement matters here. The Guardian. It tests anyone who dares to uncover Sister Agnes's work." Elias swallowed hard, his mouth dry. His eyes scanned the shadowy figure. Small, hunched, with faint glimmers of metal glinting at its belt. Spoons. Tarnished, precise, deadly. The figure did not speak, only observed, calculating. "You mean, it's been alive all this time?" Elias whispered. Matthias shook his head. "Not alive. Not exactly. It is an extension of her plan. Someone, her apprentice perhaps, or a loyal follower, has ensured the chamber, the list, and the spoons remain protected for decades. Nothing leaves without consent. The shadow shifted, moving closer, deliberate. Elias could hear the faint scrape of boots, almost lost beneath the heavy silence. The metallic smell intensified, sharp enough to make him gag. A low, raspy voice hissed, "Do not touch, do not linger, or join them." Elias's hands shook. He glanced at the bundle of spoons, then at the vials of poison in the wooden box. The parchment with Sister Agnes's final note still burned in his pocket. The words seemed alive. "Only the worthy survive my work." Suddenly, a soft metallic click echoed, and the shadow froze. The air shifted, the faint draft brushing against Elias's neck. He could feel it, measured, patient, waiting to see if he would make the next move. Brother Matthias whispered, "The Guardian is not here to kill, unless you make a mistake. One wrong step, one careless touch." Elias's stomach churned. He realized the Guardian's patience was terrifyingly precise. Every movement he had made so far had been observed, every choice tested. Then the shadow moved aside slightly, revealing a narrow pathway behind it, leading deeper into the monastery walls. A faint light flickered at the end. The Guardian was allowing passage, but only if Elias was clever, careful, and worthy. Elias's pulse raced. The legacy of Sister Agnes was more than death. It was judgment. And the thought struck him cold. If he failed this test, decades of careful planning, silent killings, and meticulous protection would claim another victim, him. He took a slow, deliberate step forward, his senses heightened. Every scrape of stone underfoot, every breath of stale air, every faint metallic tang became a warning. The Guardian's presence pressed on him, unseen but palpable. It was patience incarnate, waiting for the right or wrong moment. And Elias knew the ultimate truth. Passing this trial would reveal the final secrets of Sister Agnes. But one misstep could end him instantly. Chapter 22. The Test of Silence. Elias moved slowly along the narrow corridor revealed by the Guardian. The air was thick, damp, and carried that sharp metallic tang he could no longer ignore. Each breath tasted of iron and dust, each step on the cold stone echoing like a drumbeat in the oppressive silence. Brother Matthias whispered beside him, "This is the final corridor. Silence is your shield. Speak too loud, act too rashly, and it ends." Elias's eyes darted to the shadows. Every flicker of movement seemed purposeful, deliberate. The spoons, the vials, the hidden passages, all had prepared him for this moment, yet the fear coiled tightly in his stomach. A faint hiss brushed past his ear, like a warning carried on a breath of wind. One wrong move. Elias swallowed, the metallic tang rising sharply at the back of his throat. He could feel the weight of centuries pressing down, the monastery itself alive with the memory of death. The air smelled faintly of herbs, long dried, mixed with something acrid, remnants of poison still potent in memory. He stepped carefully, eyes fixed on the faint light at the end of the corridor. A loose stone shifted underfoot, and Elias froze. The Guardian's presence pressed closer, silent but unmistakable. The metallic scent intensified, almost burning his nostrils. "Do you hear it?" Matthias whispered. "The monastery tests you. Every sound, every movement." Elias nodded, swallowing hard. He could feel the eyes on him, though nothing moved in the shadows. Every nerve in his body was tense, waiting for the slightest signal of danger. A small metallic scrape echoed faintly from the corner, a spoon perhaps, shifted by the unseen Guardian. Elias held his breath. The corridor narrowed. The air seemed to pulse, as if the walls themselves were breathing. His skin prickled, hairs on end, a shiver crawling from the base of his spine to the back of his neck. Ahead, a faint glimmer of parchment appeared in the light, a small folded sheet lying atop a stone pedestal. His heart raced. Could this be the final piece, the ultimate revelation of Sister Agnes's plan? Elias took a slow step forward. The metallic scent sharpened, the air colder, heavier. The faint whisper returned, now clear and unmistakable. Touch it, if you dare. Every instinct screamed to stop, yet curiosity pushed him forward. The Guardian's presence was absolute, a shadow pressing upon his every movement, testing his judgment, patience, and courage. One hand hovered above the parchment. The taste of iron thickened in his mouth. Dust swirled faintly around him. And then, a sudden movement behind him, a faint rustle, deliberate, measured, reminded him that the Guardian was still close, waiting for the slightest mistake. Elias knew in that moment this was the final test. One wrong move, one careless breath, and decades of carefully orchestrated death would claim another victim. He exhaled slowly, hand trembling above the parchment. The monastery waited. Chapter 23. The Final Choice. Elias's hand hovered above the parchment, every nerve taut, every breath measured. The metallic tang of iron filled his mouth, sharp and biting, and the air seemed to hum with centuries of unseen eyes. The Guardian lingered somewhere in the shadows, silent but palpably close, its presence pressing into him like cold stone. Brother Matthias whispered, "This is it, the culmination." Sister Agnes prepared everything to the last detail. The spoons, the passages, the poison, the list. But this parchment, it is the truth itself. What you do now will decide everything. Elias's fingers shook. He could feel the faint dust of centuries settling on his skin, taste the acrid bite of herbs long dead, hear the soft scrape of movement in the shadows. The monastery was alive, watching, waiting. A faint hiss curled in his ear. Only the worthy survive. Only the prepared touch the truth. He glanced at Brother Matthias. The caretaker's face was a mask of calm, yet his eyes were sharp, almost urgent. "Do you understand?" Matthias whispered. "One wrong choice, one careless movement, and you join the others." Elias swallowed hard, tasting copper on his tongue. He looked at the parchment again. The words were in Sister Agnes's precise handwriting, elegant and terrifying. A list of names, instructions and confessions of what had truly happened that Sunday lunch. 50 men had died, yes, but there was more. A hidden plan, a method to ensure no trace remained, and a warning for the future. The Guardian shifted slightly in the shadows, faint glints of metal catching the dim light. It waited, patient, judging. Elias's hand trembled. If he touched the parchment, he would uncover the full scope of her revenge. He would know every detail, every secret, every silent death she had orchestrated. But he could also trigger whatever mechanism, the unseen Guardian, the legacy of protection that Sister Agnes had left behind. A cold draught swept the chamber. The faint metallic tang intensified. The whisper returned, soft but insistent. "Decide, or die." Elias's mind raced. 50 deaths, a hidden boy, a poisoned list, a Guardian that had survived decades, and the weight of Sister Agnes's cunning pressing down on him. He closed his eyes for a moment, tasting the dust and iron in the air, hearing the soft echo of footsteps and whispers. And then he made his choice. Slowly, carefully, Elias reached forward. A sudden deafening snap echoed through the chamber. The lights flickered. The metallic scent became almost unbearable. Something stirred in the shadows, faster, closer. Elias froze. His heart pounded. The monastery itself seemed to hold its breath. The parchment lay beneath his trembling fingers, and the final secret of Sister Agnes was about to be revealed. Chapter 24. The Legacy of Silence. Elias's hand hovered over the parchment, fingers trembling, heart hammering like a war drum. The metallic tang in the air was suffocating, sharp enough to taste. Shadows clung to the corners, thick and restless, as though the monastery itself were alive, breathing, waiting, judging. Brother Matthias whispered behind him, his voice calm but tense. "Once you read it, there's no turning back. Sister Agnes's work, her legacy, It will demand something from you. Elias swallowed hard. He could feel dust settling on his skin, smell the faint scent of herbs long dried, taste iron on his tongue, and hear faint rustling in the shadows. Every sense screamed danger, every instinct screamed to stop. But curiosity, relentless and unforgiving, pushed him forward. His fingers brushed the parchment, feeling the brittle paper beneath his touch. The elegant handwriting of Sister Agnes revealed the truth. The plan, the spoons, the boy, the hidden list, and the exact method by which 50 SS officers had been quietly, deliberately poisoned during a Sunday lunch. Each word carried weight, each instruction precise and cold. He realized the brilliance and ruthlessness of the nun. Her patience had spanned decades, her methods perfected to a terrifying degree. The monastery had not merely sheltered the secret, it had become part of it. The walls, the shadows, the guardians, they were all extensions of her design. A subtle movement behind him made Elias flinch. The guardian, unseen but palpably close, waited. Its metallic glint caught the dim light, a spoon, ready, like the ones that had carried death silently decades before. Brother Matthias whispered, "Now you know, and knowing changes everything." Elias's stomach twisted as he read the final lines. Sister Agnes had anticipated discovery. The parchment was not merely a record, it was a test. Only the care, full, the patient, the worthy could leave with their lives intact. Anyone reckless, anyone greedy for knowledge, would pay the price. The shadows shifted. A cold gust brushed against Elias's neck, and the metallic scent intensified, sharp as a knife. The guardian moved silently, evaluating, judging, as if asking, "Are you prepared to survive what you now know?" Elias exhaled slowly, tasting dust, iron, and faint herbs. He realized the enormity of the legacy he had uncovered. 50 men had died, 1 boy had vanished, and the secret had survived decades because Sister Agnes had made sure it could. And now, he was part of it. Every sense screamed vigilance, every instinct demanded caution. The monastery had accepted him as a witness, but whether it would allow him to leave alive depended on his next moves. The parchment trembled in his hand, the shadows thickened, and the metallic tang of inevitability filled the chamber. Sister Agnes had left one final message, written not just for the SS, not just for the world, but for anyone daring enough to uncover her work. The past is silent. The present watches. The worthy survive. The others join the forgotten. Elias swallowed, tasting iron and fear. The weight of history pressed down on him, cold and unyielding. And in that moment he understood. Some legacies are more deadly than any weapon. The monastery waited. The guardian waited. And the nun's secret would endure. The end.